I always like when people clap for me. Haven't even done anything yet. I'll just clap. And it's nice and I enjoy it. But what I think we ought to do now is give a round of applause to the people who have done something. And that's the committee, the people that made all of this possible, huh? Bruce called and invited me, and I was excited. Told me Cersei'd be here, and I was looking forward to seeing Cersei again. He's a wonderful human being, and I just always enjoy spending a little time with him. He told me Bob was coming, and that excited me, and then he told me Dave Denny was coming, and I came anyway, you know? You know, I'm pretty sure what I'm going to say up here today. I'm not pretty sure what you're going to hear, though. It's kind of, there's a story, and it's about this guy. There's a state trooper sitting on the side of the road. And he's just sitting there waiting for somebody to drive by, do something wrong. And here drives this truck. Pickup truck drives by, and back of the pickup truck is full of penguins. And he looks at that, and he knows there's something wrong with that, so he pulls the guy over. Whole back of the pickup truck full of penguins. He says, "Son, where are you going with those penguins?" He says, "Oh, we're not going anywhere special. We're just taking a ride." He said, "You can't ride around with penguins in the back of your pickup truck. You take those penguins to the zoo." And he said, "Yes, sir." So the next day, that trooper, he's sitting in the same place. Here comes that pickup truck, full of penguins in the back again. Except on this day, all those penguins are wearing sunglasses. And the trooper pulled him over again. He said, "Boy, I thought I told you to take those penguins to the zoo." He said, "Yes, sir, and I did. And today we're going to the beach." My name's Tim Towsley. I'm an alcoholic. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. My daddy was an alcoholic. My daddy was a member of this fellowship. He got sober in 1946. He passed away in 1980, and he had 10 years of continuous sobriety put together at that point in his life. That gave me an opportunity early in my life to see what an alcoholic was all about, to see what alcoholism was all about, and also to see what Alcoholics Anonymous was all about. I came from a family where I had 6 stepfathers. I had 13 stepmothers. I went to over 20 schools, and I never got out of the 8th grade. I left home when I was 14 years old. I've been married 3 times and divorced twice. I've had an opportunity in my life to spend time in boys' homes, in detention homes, city jails, county jails, workhouses, psych wards, treatment centers, and penitentiaries. I spent 12 years of my adult life either on parole, probation, or locked behind some kind of door somewhere. And you know, not one of those things I just mentioned are the reasons I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Those were merely the situation that my disease of alcoholism created in my life. But on June 23rd, 1982, I woke up at the bottom. And that's the bottom they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When you know a loneliness such as few men know, that's when you're at that jumping off place. That's when you're when you're wishing for the end. When you can no longer imagine life with or life without alcohol. That's the bottom. And that's not a high bottom, but that's not a low bottom either. It's the bottom. And there's only one for every human being. If you came through that door today, you admitted you're powerless over alcohol, that your life had become unmanageable, you've reached that bottom. I don't ever want to be in a position in my sobriety where I can sit in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, listen to a speaker speak, and start thinking things like, you know, maybe I wasn't that bad, huh? Maybe I was worse. I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I can start feeling unique, when I can start feeling different in any way from anybody else that's sitting in the room with me. Because as soon as I start making myself believe I'm different, then I've got reservations. And there was an old timer in Bree, Ohio, used to tell me years ago when I got sobered, "Son, if you got reservations, you must be going somewhere, huh?" And I don't want to go anywhere today. I like it here. I know that God wants me here today. I know that today. I had my first drink at 13. I got sick. I blacked out. I passed out, and I woke up in the backyard of a lady's house in Rocky River, Ohio. I had my last drink at 30. I got sick. I blacked out. I passed out, and I woke up at home in bed. And you know, that's really the only difference. 17 years of use and abuse. As I turn around and look at my life, the only difference was where I woke up the next morning. All the days were pretty much the same. But I do know God wants me here. I woke up in there. That lady woke me up in her backyard. First drunk. She found me in her backyard. She took me in her house. She cleaned me up. She laid me down. She found out who I was. She called my mother and told my mother I was okay. 17 years later, I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was sober a week, 2 weeks, I don't even remember. And I went to a meeting. And that lady was leading the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My very first drunk, I found myself in the arms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that lady did for me what they told her to do. She was 3 months sober when she found me in her backyard. You know what she did? She helped the drunk. That's what they told her to do, help a drunk. And they didn't tell her only help the male drunks or the female drunks, the white drunks or the black drunks, the old drunks or the young drunks. They told her help a drunk, period. And that's what she did that night. And I still see that lady at meetings today. She's still sober and helping drunks. There's two things in my life I ran from most of my life. I have a lot of them in my life today, and I'm still not crazy about them. Don't like them, not even a little bit most of the time. But I deal with those two things. And those two things are responsibility and authority. I don't like being responsible, huh? There's a lot of responsibility involved with being responsible. And I certainly don't like people telling me I'm supposed to be responsible. And it seemed like in my life at 13 and 14 years old, everybody had an idea about my life, what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to go, and how I was supposed to act. No one asked me if I cared. If you're wondering, I can share this. Let me share this with you right now, that my hair has always been just a little bit too long. Huh? The heels on my boots were too high. My jeans were too tight. Tim, you should smoke. Don't smoke, Tim. Tim, you should drink. No, don't drink, Tim. Tim, go to school. No, don't go to school, Tim. Tim, come home. No, please don't come home, Tim, huh? Everybody had an idea. I'm 14 years old. I'm at a family gathering, and I'm hearing people talk, and I heard somebody say my daddy was sober. My real father was sober, and he was in New Orleans, and I knew that was my problem. If I had my real father, my life would be better. And I left home the next day to find my real father. I went to New Orleans. I contacted Alcoholics Anonymous. They contacted my daddy, and they put us together. And all of a sudden, I had a daddy. And all of a sudden, he had a son. And we both tried to be those two things. And we did the very best we could, but neither one of us had ever been either of those two things before. And it just didn't work out. For about 3 months, we tried. And then my daddy started drinking again. And I found something out. I used to come home at 13, 14 years old, drunk, pass out in my mama's living room. The next morning, she'd wake me, she'd shake me, she'd scream at me, and she'd tell me, don't drink. Please don't drink, you'll get what your father has. But I never saw what she was trying to keep me from getting until I was in New Orleans when I was 14 years old. And I watched my daddy drink, and I watched him get drunk, and I watched him go into the DTs, and I watched the people from Alcoholics Anonymous come into our little apartment and take him away and put him in Bridge House in New Orleans. And at 14 years old, I made a decision in my life. I'm not going to be an alcoholic. I'm not going to end up like my daddy ended up. And I didn't have another drink for the next 4 years. But I had 4 good years. I didn't do anything for the next 4 years, really. But here I am all of a sudden. I'm 14 years old. I got no responsibility. I got no authority. I got the rest of my life to go wherever I want to go, stay as long as I want to stay, and come back when I'm tired of being there. And it's 1966. Huh? I guess I was a hippie. At least that's what folks called me. Sometimes there'd be another word in front of it if I was like in Texas or somewhere. But I really didn't do much anything but hitchhike all over this country. If I woke up in Los Angeles, didn't like it there, I'd go to Denver. If I didn't like Denver, I'd go to Mobile. If Mobile didn't make me happy, I'd go to Miami. And I just went wherever I wanted to go. And I had a good life. I had 4 good years. My expectations were met. If I had a sleeping bag, if I had a pack of cigarettes, and I had something to eat on that day, it was a good day. That's all I wanted out of life. And if I could get that, it was a good day. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells me my expectations are inversely proportional to my serenity level. You know, you probably won't understand this, but I'm going to share it with you. If I get exactly, I mean exactly, what I think I'm supposed to have, when I think I'm supposed to have it, you know, I'm a pretty happy guy. But as soon as it doesn't work my way, my expectations aren't met and my serenity level drops. I'm tired. I'm 18 years old and I'm tired. I've been everywhere. I've seen everything. And all of a sudden I want something. I want some of that American dream. I'm seeing people on the other sides of the freeways. They're painting the garage. They're playing with their kids. They're mowing the grass. They're doing something. And they're doing it in their backyard, same bed every day. And I want some of this. And at 18 years old, I'm outside Salt Lake City, and I'm going home because I want some of that stuff from the magazine ads. You know the magazine ads that tell us if we drive this kind of car, we're okay? If we live in that kind of neighborhood, we're okay. And if we wear these kind of clothes, we're okay. And if I knew, if I could get those things to show you, you'd see them on me, and you'd tell me, Tim, you're okay. Because I couldn't tell me I was okay. And you wouldn't tell me I was okay if I didn't have what the magazine ad said I was supposed to have. I'm outside Salt Lake City, me and a buddy of mine. I'm 18 years old. It's cold. Guy dropped us off at an off-ramp in Utah. I don't know how many off-ramps out. There was nothing at this off-ramp. There's no convenience store. There's no gas station. There's no houses. There's no nothing but a mountain. There's a road that goes up into a mountain somewhere in the middle of Utah. And we woke up the next morning cold up in those mountains. And I know God wants me here. We walked down that on-ramp to start hitchhiking east. And sitting at the bottom of that on-ramp, in the middle of Utah, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, at 5:30 in the morning, is a six-pack of Olympia beer. I know God wants me here. I drank 3 beers. He drank 3 beers. I looked across at him. I said, if I ever get back to Cleveland alive, I'm settling down. I'm going to marry the first girl I see. Magazine ad said you had to have one. I got back to Cleveland alive. I stopped at my parents' home. My stepfather wasn't there, so I was allowed in. I changed my clothes. I took a shower. I borrowed my mother's car. I drove to the corner to buy a pack of cigarettes, picked a young lady up hitchhiking, and we got married. We didn't get married that day. Now, we might have. But in the state of Ohio, the female has to be 18 or have parental consent, and the male has to be 21 or have parental consent. And when I married my first wife, she was 15 and I was 18. And this was not a marriage that was made in heaven. But I can tell you this. I live in my brother's van parked in the driveway of my parents' home because I'm not allowed in it. She lives wherever she can because there's things going on in her home that she just doesn't want to go back to. And all of a sudden we were together. We weren't alone anymore. And that was enough. That's all we needed. We weren't alone anymore. And it was a simple marriage. I'd get up in the morning, I'd get drunk. She'd get up in the morning, she'd get drunk. Then we'd beat each other up. And now we did that one day at a time for about 7 years. But out of those 7 years, I was away a lot. I still traveled a lot. Even though I was back and married and all that, I traveled a lot. I was always going somewhere. I had a bad attitude. And it seemed like I was always going somewhere. I got a report card at home from the 3rd grade. They send a report card home. You got to show it to your mama, and the teacher writes something on the back, and she got to sign it, and you take it back to them. You know what it says on my 3rd grade report card? Bad attitude. It says, Timothy does not play well with others. Man, I'm 8 years old. They know I got a problem, But I had a lot of problems. I got arrested a lot. Seemed like I was always in jail. Seemed like for 12 years of my life, I only did 2 things. I got ready to go to jail, and then I got ready to come home from being in jail. And I'd go these places, and I'd get up in the morning, and I'd go downtown Cleveland, and I'd go to these places, and I'd walk into these rooms. It'd be a big room. There'd be a big bench up here. There'd be a guy behind it in a black robe. And I don't know, every time he did this, I went somewhere. Now, I got arrested for a lot of dumb stuff. I wasn't a violent criminal. I was a stupid criminal. I got arrested for stuff like verbal abuse of a police officer, And this was in a little town called Parma, Ohio. I got arrested for obscene finger language to a police officer. And this was in Parma, Ohio. If y'all have never been to Parma, Ohio, I'm going to tell you this. They got no sense of humor in Parma, Ohio. I was just always going to jail. I was always in trouble. And I don't know about anybody else, but I was at a meeting. I'm about 2.5 years sober. And I don't know about anybody else, but 2 years sober, I probably knew more about AA than anybody else in the whole state of Ohio at 2 years sober. I just knew everything at 2 years sober. When I got to a meeting, I made sure y'all knew I knew everything about Alcoholics Anonymous too. But I was at a meeting, and you know how you hear things, you've heard those things before, but all of a sudden they make sense? There was a long-timer, an old friend of mine. He had a past a lot like mine, only it was 20 years prior. And he was speaking at the meeting that night, and I've heard him talk probably 100 times before that. And he stood up here and he said this. He said, I've been arrested 63 times. I wasn't a good criminal. Man, the light went right on, I know I've been charged with 63 crimes. I wasn't a good criminal. But in that verbal abuse of a police officer case, I learned something else. You see, I decided to represent myself in that case. Well, you didn't think I could do it or what? I just figured, I saw enough Perry Mason and Judd for the defense, and I can do this, So I went to court, and I called witnesses, and I cross-examined their witnesses. I gave my final arguments to the judge. Y'all know what I found out, right? I'm not a very good attorney either. That's just the way my life was going. 1975, I stood in front of a judge in that old Lakeside courthouse in downtown Cleveland, and he sentenced me to 20 to 40 years in the penitentiary. I took a big sigh of relief that day. I felt good when he said that. Now, my mother and my wife are in the back of the courtroom, and they're crying. They don't think it's a good idea that I go away, and certainly not for that long, but they don't know what I know. You see, that judge, he doesn't know what I know on that day. But I know this. I know you can't send me anywhere that's going to hurt me as much as I've hurt me. I know it on that day. And that judge doesn't know. He can't punish me as much as I can punish me. And on that day, I know that. And I went to the penitentiary. In 1976, the laws changed. My sentence changed from a 20 to 40 to a 1 to 10. And 3 years later, they sent me home. But when I got home, all my stuff was gone. Everything was gone. There was nothing left. All that stuff from the magazine ads, all that stuff I had to have to fit into your society was gone. My wife was gone. My car was gone. My motorcycle was gone. My clothes were gone. My jewelry was gone. Everything was gone. And for the next 3 months, I sat in a chair in my house and I drank. I got as drunk as I could, passed out as I could, blacked out as I could, as many times a day as I needed to. I crawled into a bottle, but not once in my life have I ever crawled into a bottle of alcohol to hide from you. I've never once crawled into a bottle of alcohol to hide from them. I got as drunk as I could, passed out as I could, blacked out as I could, a day at a time, as many times a day as I needed to. And I crawled in that bottle to hide from me. You see, I knew what I was. And if I was drunk enough, I didn't have to see it. I knew I was an ex-con. I was an ex-husband. I was an ex-brother. And I was an ex-son. I failed at everything in my life. Finally, a friend of mine came over after about 3 months, and he almost physically took me out of my home. He says, I'm not going to let you sit here and die. You're not going to sit in this chair and drink yourself to death. You're out of prison. It's time to start living again. And he took me down to a little part of Cleveland they call the Flats. This is a long time ago. They've since ruined the Flats of Cleveland. Used to be a real nice place, just where you go get drunk, you know? The bar rooms were all flooded, and I can guess what they were flooded with, but it just didn't make any difference. It was just and now they got fancy boats and fancy reds. Terrible place to go now. But he took me down to the Flats, and we're in we're a little bar called the Pirates Cove. I'm drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. My cousin's band is playing that night, and they're playing a Marshall Tucker tune. And this pretty little girl walked past me, and she smiled at me. You know, I smiled right back. I'd been in jail a long time. And that was her. That was my future ex-wife, huh? The plaintiff. That's who that was. Let me tell you about my second wife. She came to my home, and she brought some stuff with her. She brought some stuff I didn't know anything about. She brought some stuff that was never in my home before. She brought things like purity with her. She brought honesty. She brought love, and she brought unselfishness. She brought those things with her into our home. And 4 years later, she left. And she only had one thing left to take, and that was the disease of alcoholism. It stripped every decent thing that woman had. I tried for a couple years. I tried to be that magazine ad. I had a decent job. I made decent money. I was moving up in the company. I tried to do the right thing. And for 2 years, I worked real hard. I didn't miss a day. I didn't call in sick. I just worked real hard and did the right thing for 2 years. And after 2 years of working that hard, one night I'm sitting on the couch drunk, looking at my life. And after 2 years, you listening to me? I did this for 2 years. You know, I don't have a house on the lake. I don't have 2 Lincolns sitting in the driveway. I'm not wearing the right kind of clothes. I don't live in the right kind of neighborhood, and I'm certainly not running around with the right kind of people. After 2 years. So I made a decision that night, drunk. Those things were for other people. I was never supposed to have them anyway. So no matter what I did, it didn't make any difference. And I woke up the next morning, called my boss, and quit my job. And I went to drinking full time. The end of my drinking's not real exciting. I got up in the morning, I got drunk. If I got up again that day, I got drunk again. And that's what I did, a day at a time. My wife lasted for a couple years. She tried the best she could. She had the disease of alcoholism. And she tried the best she could, wondering what she did to make me do what I did. But I couldn't help her. I couldn't even help myself. And she finally had to leave. This is my life at the end of my drinking. You know those family gatherings we have? Maybe it's Easter. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, Christmas. We all gather at some central location. We have a family meal. We'll sit down, we'll hold hands, we'll say grace. We'll thank God for the meal and for the family. And then we'll share our lives with each other. At the end of my drinking, this is how it works in my family. I drive to my parents' home and I drive in the driveway. And I blow the horn in my car. When they hear the horn in my car, my little brother comes out of the back door and he's got a paper plate in his hand. It's wrapped in tinfoil. And he hands me my holiday meal. And I'm allowed to sit in my car and eat my holiday meal off a paper plate with a plastic fork and a plastic knife. But I can't sit at their table. I can't hold their hands and say grace. They don't want to share anything with me that's going on in my life at that time in my life. But I don't want you to think, not even for a minute, that they ever stopped loving me. Not even this much. They just finally realized that every time they reached down and stopped me from hitting my bottom, that they were hurting me. Every time they stopped me from being responsible for myself, they were helping to kill me. And they finally figured that out. You know how much my parents loved me? They let me go. I don't have any children. I can only imagine how much love that must have. I got a dog at this time in my life. I got a Doberman. I got a dumb Doberman. I said that at a meeting in Cleveland once. A guy stood up at the end of the meeting. He says, dumb Doberman is redundant. So, you know, I went home and looked up redundant. He was right. I used to take this dog. I'd get home. I'd take the dog outside. I'd tie the dog to the tree. Leave him out there a half hour. Bring the dog in a half hour later. As soon as he got in the house, he peed on the floor. Don't know why he thought I was tying him to that tree. That's probably what he was thinking about the whole time he was out there. At the end of my drinking, right before my wife left, I got up one morning just like every other morning, not knowing where I was or what was going on, and I looked around and I saw I was at home, so I made a phone call to my wife. And I just asked my wife if she, every day if she left me any wine money or cigarette money laying around the house, and she was frantic that morning. She said, "Where's the dog?" I said, "Dog's laying next to the bed right here. What's the matter?" She says, "Be careful of the dog." I said, "What do you mean, be careful of the dog?" She says, "The dog was growling and showing his teeth last night. I was really afraid the dog was going to hurt you." I said, "No, that dog wouldn't hurt me. I'm its master. That dog loves me." She goes, "I was afraid. Be careful." I said, "Well, what happened?" Apparently, I came home the night before in a blackout, and I walked into the bedroom and I peed on the bedroom floor. You know that poor dog's probably sitting there thinking, that dirty SOB's kicked my ass 100 times for doing that, you know? Even my dog has a resentment at this time in my life, right? I got up that morning, June 23rd, 1982, at that bottom I told you about, and I didn't know what to do, and I always did the same thing when I didn't know what to do. I called my mama. My mama came just like she always did. And it was a simple call. I probably made that call 1,000 times in my life, maybe 5,000, I don't know. It's just, "Mom, help," and she came. She walked into my home. She found me on the living room floor. I'm kneeling in the middle of the living room. I weigh 112 pounds. I'm shaking apart and I'm crying uncontrollably. And the first words out of my mother's mouth were, "I'll kill her for doing this to you." Alcoholism. This is a family disease, and I'm not the only one I hurt when I pick up a drink. Blaming others is a big part of this disease. My mother has it too. We made some phone calls and I wound up in the emergency room. I got a doctor playing with my stomach. He says, "Son, you have an alcohol problem." I said, No. Not going to be no alcoholic. I told y'all before, I didn't want to be no alcoholic. I'm laying on the table and I'm vibrating. And they're telling me, and we're arguing back and forth. And he says, "Look, I don't care what you want to be or don't want to be. If you don't stop drinking, you're going to die." And I heard him. Then they sent me to a psych ward on the east side of Cleveland. I spent 10 days in that psych ward. I spent 3 in restraints. Now, I wasn't restrained because I was seeing things or trying to escape or anything, but I tried to hurt myself the night before, and I think they were just trying to look after me a little bit better. I got a psychiatrist in my psych ward. I got the happiest psychiatrist on earth in my psych ward. And he comes to visit me about 6 o'clock in the morning every morning. "Tim, how are you? Huh? Good to see. Isn't it a beautiful day?" Now, I don't know about the rest of y'all. 6 o'clock in the morning, tied to a bed, in a psych ward on the east side of Cleveland, I'm not real spiritual. And I told him what I thought, and he listened, and he just did what psychiatrists do. Y'all know what they do, right? They write in their charts, and they nod their heads. That's what they do, and that's what he did. But I know God wants me here. On the third day, he walked into my room. The restraints came off. The chart went in a windowsill. And he sat on my bed and he said, Tim, I want to tell you this. I can't make your wife come home. I don't have a job to give you. I'm not making a house payment for you. But if you never want to take another drink as long as you live, I can tell you how to do that, one day at a time. This psychiatrist was a recovering member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he sat on the edge of my bed. And he shared a little bit of his story with me. And then I shared a little bit of my story with him. It started out when I got there that I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. Now that sounds like step one, but it's not. But when that psychiatrist sat on my bed and he shared with me, then it became we. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, and that's step one. And I know today that without the we, I don't have a chance, man. 7 days later, he sent me home, and the prescription he gave me when I left the psych ward, he gave me the most valuable thing anybody in the world's ever given me to date. He gave me a meeting scheduled to Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, you go to a meeting and you get a sponsor. And I went home and I didn't know what to do, and I told y'all what I do when I don't know what to do. I called my mama. Mom, I got to go to AA meeting. Mom says, all right, I'll come get you. She knows all about Alcoholics Anonymous. Been going to meetings since the 40s. Been a big book in my house as long as I can remember. And she took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was July 4th. It was 1982. And she dropped me at your doorstep. And she left me with this advice, and I'm going to share it with you. She said, I'm not coming back to get you. You go to the front table, you tell the people at the front table you're new. You don't have a driver's license, you don't have a car. You need a ride home. And stay away from the women in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I paid attention to just about half of my mama's advice. But I got a sponsor that night. And my sponsor got me active that night. His wife was a chairperson. She handed me the traditions and asked me if to read. And I backed off. And I said, he just took the straps off me. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know if I really ought to do that. And he looked at me and goes, here's your first lesson in AA. You never say no to Alcoholics Anonymous. No matter what the request is, the answer is yes. That's all you're ever going to need to know, Tim. And then he says, now I want you to go shake hands with everybody in the room. When you're done shaking hands, you can get a cup of coffee and you can sit down. He told me to read one page of the big book every day. He said, don't turn that page until tomorrow. You read that page as many times that day as you want to or think you need to, but do not turn the page until tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, in 164 days, you'll know something about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, if you sat in a chair, you pick it up. You dirty an ashtray, you empty it. He says, if you're not praying, this is the way I want you to do it. You're going to use 3 words I know your mother taught you when you were a little boy. You're going to get up in the morning. You're going to kneel down and you're going to say, please. You're going to get up and you're going to go about your day. And at the end of that day, if you hadn't had a drink, you're going to kneel back down and you're going to say, thank you. Please and thank you. My mother did teach me those 3 words when I was a little boy. You know what she called them? Magic words. What's the magic word, Timmy? I had no idea. No idea how much magic those words held until I came to you and you showed me how to use them. My sponsor kept me active. He said, do you want what we got? I don't know. What do you got? I didn't know what he's talking about. What do you got? I know he's got a brand new Tornado. He's wearing a presidential Rolex. And he's got a stewardess wife with the prettiest eyes I ever saw in my whole life. Do I want what you got? Yeah, what page is that on? Take some of that myself, sure. I don't know because I didn't know what I wanted when I got here. And I don't think the new man has to want anything to come through that door. All I knew when I got here is what I didn't want. That is what I knew. I know what I don't want. I don't know what I want yet. Show me what you got. And they did. They took me to the meetings. They picked me up. They explained things to me. They carried me. They loved me. And I came to believe by watching them that my life could be different. And it has become different. I knelt down with my sponsor and I said a 3rd step prayer. He was always telling me to turn it over. Turn it over, he'd say. No matter what my problem was, turn it over. First year I was sober, that's all I got. Turn it over. One more turn it over, I'm hurting somebody. I want the answer. And then they gave me the answer in the 3rd step. He explained it to me so even I could understand. He gave me a penny. I always have a penny. You have a penny, you can understand the 3rd step too. Because if you look at the penny, the back of the penny has a Lincoln Memorial on it. It says 1 cent. Do you know what happens when you turn it over? On the front of the penny, it says, in God we trust. That's the 3rd step. In God we trust. That step's not about God's will. That step's about my will. Am I willing to trust God with it today? I can tell you I am. And if you go down a little farther on that penny, you'll find another word. That word's liberty. That's the freedom you're going to have. You can trust God a day at a time. And then I started on that 4th step. But y'all know that's not one of them steps you want to rush right into, right? You got to really take your time with that 4th step because you got to read all the books. Look at the books. If we ain't got nothing in this, will you look at the books? Man, if we ain't got nothing in this fellowship, man, we got books. We got blue books, we got blue and blue books, we got little blue books, we got little black books, we got little red books, we got little green books. We got books, and you got to read all them books because you don't want to mess your 4th step up. You don't read all the books, don't ask all the right questions, you might mess it up, right? Only one way you can do that 4th step wrong. Don't do it. That's the only way to do it wrong. I read all those books, I asked all those questions, I procrastinated for a long time. You know, I'm almost 20 years sober today, and I'm still not real sure what Mr. Jones's problem is, huh? I'm sitting at home one day, my phone rang. It's my sponsor. He said, how's that 4th step coming? I said, oh, it's coming right along. He said, that's good. Good. He says, well, it'll get done in God's time, he tells me. And you know, that's exactly when I was thinking that it was going to get done, too. And I hung the phone up. 5 minutes later, phone rings again. It's my sponsor. How's that 4th step coming? I got something now, right? I got information. Gave it right back to him. I say it's going to get done in God's time. He said, that's a good thing. God's time's tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I made an appointment for you to do your 5th. My sponsor was always doing stuff for me. He sit behind you at meetings. They say, we need coffee help. He'd raise my hand. Tim will do it. Tim still does it. I'm an active member of the West Clifton group of Alcoholics Anonymous, Lakewood, Ohio, Friday night at 9 o'clock. I have a very important job at my home group. I think it's the most important job you can have at your home group. You know what I do? I turn the lights out. Huh? That's what I do. I'm the last one out, and I turn the lights out at my home. If you can get that job, get it. You'll learn a lot. It's an important job. I did a 4th and a 5th, and then I became entirely ready. And I humbly asked God for help because I can't do it by myself. And God showed me the 8th step and told me to forgive. I had to learn to forgive everybody that ever wronged me before I had any kind of a prayer to go out and ask for forgiveness from anybody that I've wronged. If I can't give it, I can't receive it. If I can't forgive everybody, I have no right to ask anybody else for forgiveness. And as soon as I could, I went out and I made direct amends to the people I've wronged. And you know, before I was halfway through, those promises started coming true, just like the book says. I got that Lincoln parked outside today. I keep it disguised as a Ford. You know, that's just so no one will steal it. You might have saw it. You might think that's not a Lincoln. That's maybe what you saw, but remember this. There's only one person in this room today that's looking out of your eyes. That's the only person that's responsible for what you see. You can see good or you can see bad, but you're the one looking. And I'm going to get inside my car. Alcoholics Anonymous is an inside job. I spent most of my life thinking that if I could make the outside look good enough, the inside would feel better. And it never worked until I came to you and you showed me that I needed to start inside and work my way out. I have a great life today. I have a wonderful life today. I know how to live resentment-free today. Huh? I didn't say I did. I just said I know how to. They tell you in Indiana, pray for your enemies. Have you heard this one? Huh? Isn't that beautiful? Pray for your enemies, they're telling me, you know. They just took the straps off me, and I don't know about anybody else. I had a few resentments when I got here. You know, my ex-wife left. She took what little bit of nothing I had, and she left. And I still want to do something nice for her, like maybe buy her a new car, like a 72 Pinto with no brake lights, something like that, you know. And they're telling me, pray for my enemies. I went to see my sponsor, or not my sponsor, my baby brother. My baby brother's a born-again Christian. I went to see him. I said, you know what these knuckleheads in Alcoholics Anonymous told me to do? Pray for my enemies. He said, you know, you should, Tim. Tells you to in the Bible. I said, does not. He said, does too. He went and he got the Bible. Do you know what it says in the Bible? It says, praying for your enemies is like heaping hot coals upon their heads. I like that. That's not what you told me. But that's the way my God wanted me to hear it. See, my God lets me hear my messages. Not the way you think I'm supposed to hear him, but the way he knows I'll hear him. And I heard that, and I went home and I knelt down. And you know my God doesn't care what I say once I kneel down. If I go home tonight and I kneel down and I say, dear God, please let all my enemies go to heaven tomorrow. You know he don't care? I don't know who has your message, do you? I can't sit around and wait for somebody with 50 years of sobriety. If somebody's talking in my life, I need to be listening, and I know that because I don't know who God sent with my message that day. I got a message on the first step about 9 years ago, 10 years ago. I remember. I was invited to speak in Valparaiso, Indiana, and my wife couldn't come that weekend, so I brought a new guy with me. And I didn't want to drive my car because it was a piece of garbage, so I brought my wife's car. She got a Honda Civic. You know, what do you get in a Honda Civic? 300 miles to a gallon in a Honda Civic, right? You just drive a Honda Civic from now on, I think. So I threw my new guy in the car, threw him in the Honda Civic, jumped in the Honda Civic. I started headed for Valparaiso. We're going by a sign, and it said that my exit was 4 or 5 exits away. And I looked down at the gas gauge, and the gas gauge said empty. And I thought, well, yeah, empty, like in a real car empty, you know, but Honda Civic empty, you got to have 50 miles, right? There's only 20 left in Indiana. I got plenty of gas. I never thought about it again till we went underneath the sign that said my exit was 2 miles. And as soon as I got underneath that sign, I ran out of gas. If you got a Honda Civic and it says empty, they mean that. That's exactly what they mean. So I coasted for another mile, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and here I am on the side of the road in Indiana. Got a new guy sitting next to me. You know, I don't even want to turn and look at him. I just spent the better part of about 4.5 hours telling him all about responsibility and stuff like that. I had to do something. So I turned and I looked at him. And he just kind of grinned. Y'all know that new guy grin, right? They sit around and wait for you to do something wrong. And he just kind of grinned and he looked up at me and he said, we're powerless, ain't we? I said, yeah, you bet we are. I said, what do you think we ought to do about it? He said, we probably better admit it. I said, yeah, because if we don't admit there's a problem, we ain't never going to get anywhere, are we? I said, all right, we're powerless. We admitted it. What do we do next? He says, I think we're going to take certain steps. You know we did. We walked about 1.5 miles to the nearest gas station. I don't know who has your message. Are you listening? Are you listening to everybody you can hear? I take one word from each of the last 3 steps. That's how I live my life today. Continued, improve, and practice. Now, each one of those words is an action word. You got to do something if you want something. Half measures avail us nothing, my big book says. Doesn't say half. It says nothing. And I don't know about anybody else that's here. I've had more nothing in my life than I want. I don't want any more nothing. I have a good life today. There's a difference in my life today. Dave said, I go to the prisons and I talk to the guys and I don't like doing it. I've been in prison. I swore I'd never go back, but I do. And I was reminded years ago that when you want to make a phone call from the penitentiary, it's got to be a collect call. And I was reminded of that at one of those prisons, and now it reminds me of the difference in my life I have today. I remembered when I was allowed to make a collect call from the penitentiary, and they walked me into the bullpen in 1975. They walked me up to the phone. They told me I could call anybody in the world I wanted, but I had to call collect. And I had this much time to do it, and I walked up to that phone and I dialed. Then I dialed some more, and I dialed some more. And I kept dialing until I was out of time. And you know I couldn't find one person on this earth, not one, that would accept a collect phone call from me at that time in my life, not one. But on October 16th, 1993, I married my third wife, Mary. I married a young lady in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I married a very intelligent lady in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, a very educated lady. A lot of her friends didn't think she's so smart. But my wife has a lot of letters after her name. She's been in school since she was old enough to go to school. She's still in school. She's a professor at Case Western Reserve University. She got BAs and MAs and PhDs, and she just got all kinds of letters after her name. And it makes me proud. Somebody asked me once, one of my new guys asked me once, he said, doesn't that intimidate you? Does that intimidate you that your wife is so intelligent, that your wife is so educated? I had thought about it for a moment. Never had before, you know? Intimidate me? It makes me proud as hell. That makes me proud. My wife came to Alcoholics Anonymous and she didn't have any letters after her name. But through the strength of her God, her sponsor, the women of her home group that gave her the courage and the self-worth to know she could, she has those letters after her name today. Only because of God and Alcoholics Anonymous does she have that. Can I be intimidated by God or Alcoholics Anonymous? I can't. And I proved how proud I was last year. A few years ago, I got some of those plates, those vanity plates. You know, I swore I'd never get any. I think they're disgusting. But I got some. You know what my plates say? PhD, GED. I got letters after my name, too. We had an AA wedding. It started with the Serenity Prayer. It ended with the Lord's Prayer. It had a reading from the 12 and 12 in between. We invited 320 people to that wedding. You know how many came? About 340. That's the difference. That's the difference from then to now. And there's only one reason I can see as I look back over my life why that difference is there. And that's because on July 4th, 1982, I walked into a room just like this. I met people just like you. You gave me a book, and you told me my life didn't have to be the way it was anymore. You promised me if I did what you said, it would be different. I know today that gratitude's an action word. So I know there's not enough hands for me to shake. There's not enough big books for me to buy. There's not enough ashtrays, empties, chairs to put away, or lights to turn out to show you. I mean, truly show you how grateful I am for what you've done for me. Please, just let me say thanks very, very much.